I don't trust government. I've been in it my whole life, and I don't trust it. There's a group of folks that are inherently, they're power hungry and they're evil. Since 1947, at least, our government's been lying to us. Now, all of a sudden, they want money to study the issue. CIA or NSA or somebody, I don't know. And they gave us a great briefing on some really scary stuff that's going on. Some of them are archaeological and digs that people have found. Some of them are craft that have crashed recently. You look at the hieroglyphics and things, and some people have mentioned that there is, they wouldn't call it portholes, they could see out of it, the craft. Maybe the Mediterranean, I believe where they were at the time in the Navy. And when the craft slowed down over them, that they could see before it got to them, or when it's pulling out or whatever, they could see that there was obviously some kind of viewing apparatus in it. Pilots tell us how these things had hovered out there for hours. Even on one of the audios of one of the tapes, you said, man, there's a squadron of those things out here. And that's not a fake, that's a real deal. And they saw this craft just fly over them. It didn't make a noise. And he said it was two F-16s or whatever chasing it. Described that they were very minuscule in size compared to this thing. And then it just took off. And it didn't make a noise. And the ones that come forward, all they're going to get is abuse. Look at David Grusch. They made fun of him. They leaked he had PTSD. We had these two pilots. Why would they want to endanger the reputation of their career? By coming out with this. Yeah. They have no ulterior motives. Just say Grusch wasn't even there. Two military pilots, best in the world, best trained, best aircraft, everything. Sworn testimony. Swear to God, and before Congress, that they had chased a craft. Why would Gordo Cooper, one of the most famous Apollo astronauts of all time, he describes an incident where you said Wright-Patterson, and he describes it. He said they're sitting there and they filmed it. The craft comes in, a saucer, landing gear comes out. It does. And I'm not sure if anybody got out of it. I'm not sure I can't remember all of it, and then landing gear goes up, it takes off. And like, just what the hell was that? It's either one of two things. Either they're breaking the technology out, and that's why we're seeing some advances now, or they've got it, and they realize that the power brokers in this world will no longer be in the oil business. They will no longer be, and they'll have to get out and get an honest job like the rest of us. Well, no, Congress isn't necessarily an honest job, but you get my point.
Tim Burchett has been actively pushing for greater transparency regarding unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, commonly known as UFOs. On May 17, 2024, he introduced the UAP Transparency Act, which would require the declassification of all federal documents related to UAPs within 270 days. This bill aims to force the Pentagon and federal agencies to be more transparent with the American people about UAP-related information. Burchett has been vocal about his belief that there may be a cover-up regarding UAPs. Following a classified briefing, he expressed suspicions that the U.S. government might be concealing information about these phenomena from the public. He has criticized the Pentagon for denying the existence of UAPs while spending millions of taxpayer dollars on studying them.
First chapter of Ezekiel. Go back and read it. You'll think you're on acid or something. But if you read it, and realize, too, it's the King James translation. So King James, he translated it from Aramaic, I believe. I think that's right. I'm sure somebody's going to correct me on that, but I'm not a biblical philosopher. I just read it. Yeah, it's in there, and it talks about a visitor coming down. It describes a craft. It describes the landing gear. I think it talks about them in some translations like hood feet. So you'd think, a traditional pad that comes out, like you've seen in the science fiction movies and stuff. I look at those stars in the sky, and those stars, the light left those stars, some of those stars, before the time of Christ. That is the vastness of God's great universe. And honestly, do you think we're the best that God can do? There was a loud explosion, and later the next day, a farmer was out I'm just paraphrasing all this, some of this might not be. He found some material. He found what he had said was what we'd call a traditional flying saucer, but flying saucer was a terminology that wasn't quite the terminology, He reported it. The military came in, Army Air Corps at Roswell. They put out, military intelligence put out a press release, said saucer recovered. Headlines, boom, across the country. Then the next day, they came in and said, oh, it wasn't a flying saucer. It was a hot air balloon. And they bring this poor colonel out, and he's showing, there's famous pictures of him showing it's clearly a couple of some kind of balloon apparatus. Military intelligence went from a flying saucer to a pile of cloth and sticks. We go into the skiff, which is, James Bond kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't have a Fitbit, but if you had a Fitbit, you had to take it off. You got a watch or anything electronic or a phone, you had to put it in the little, similar to the things they found the training at the White House, those kind of compartmentalized things. So we go in. It's a big room, a lot of brass, a lot of suits, probably CIA or NSA or somebody, I don't know. And they gave us a great briefing on some really scary stuff that's going on in and around where they are.
Can you elaborate on any of that?
Not really. That's what I'm saying. This is a trap. We got to get in the skiff to get this information. In some instances, unless it's been put out, which all this stuff, mostly the stuff at Eglin was put out by other people. But if they tell you that stuff, it's secret. And you're not allowed to talk about it. You know, that's what they want to do with David Grusch. They want, let's get him in the skiff. Let's get this information. Well, it's kind of questionable if they do that, if we can even talk about it. The most talked about UFO hearing in the world. I mean, bar none.
Yeah.
International. I mean, we had people covering it from all over the world. I was literally having to turn down interviews just because there was just not enough time.
How did you and the rest of the team that you had assembled, how did you guys decide on which 3 you wanted?
It wasn't. You know, we cast a pretty broad net, and, you know, we probably 15 or 20 targets that I knew of that would be good in certain areas, and then they just kept whittling it down, and I didn't want 15 or 20. I didn't want a cattle call because it's not conducive to the issue. I wanted people with firsthand knowledge is what I wanted, and military to me is the ticket. And I knew if they discredited Grusch, we had these 2 pilots. Why would they want to endanger the reputation of their career? I mean, you know, by coming out with this.
Yeah.
They have no ulterior motives. Just say Grusch wasn't even there. 2 military pilots, best in the world, best trained, best aircraft, everything. Sworn testimony. Swear to God, and before Congress, that they had chased a craft.
He was talking about reverse engineering crafts. Where is he saying these crafts came from? Where did we recover them?
Some of them are archaeological in digs that people have found. Some of them are craft that have crashed recently that have just been covered up.
Is there anything in particular that you find a commonality in all the different reports? Like maybe where do the majority of UAP sightings happen?
Yeah, military installations, but I couch that because obviously military installations are where radar is going to be and where our high-tech stuff's going to be. They checking out our craft, are they checking out these areas, or are they're just prevalent and we have such high-tech equipment that it picks them up. We had pilots tell us how these things had hovered out there for hours. Even on one of the audios of one of the tapes, you said, man, there's a squadron of those things out here. And that's not a fake, that's a real deal. The Pentagon, the other agencies, I think they're realizing, again, America believes, and the world frankly believes, we're not alone. I think they smell dollars. NASA is, they're always hungry for money. They're trying to get to Mars. They're trying to do all this other stuff. Since 1947 at least, our government's been lying to us. Now all of a sudden they want money to study the issue. How are we supposed to believe y'all that all of a sudden you want to study these things when you've told us they don't exist? They didn't really have a clear answer. Why would Gordo Cooper, one of the most famous Apollo astronauts of all time, he describes an incident where you said Wright-Patterson. You can watch the videos. And he describes it. He said they're sitting there and they filmed it. The craft comes in, a saucer, landing gear comes out. It does. And I'm not sure if anybody got out of it. I'm not sure I can't remember all of it. And then landing gear goes up, it takes off. And they're like, just what the hell was that? And they filmed it, sent it to Wright-Pat. They called the next day and they said, we don't know what you're talking about. You know, I don't trust government. I've been in it my whole life, and I don't trust it. There's a group of folks that they're power hungry and they're evil, and they don't share yours and my values. And you can talk about the compartmentalization of this stuff and how do you keep something like that secret? Well, I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I back up to Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And there's 6,000 people that work at Oak Ridge that live in my district. But Oak Ridge is where they developed the atomic bomb. Well, one of them anyway. And I was knocking on this old guy's door as an old man. He's putting his flag out. And I was talking to him. I said, you a veteran? And he said, no. And he was kind of a little embarrassed. He said, I worked at Oak Ridge during the war. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And I hugged him. I said, listen, brother. I said, if it wasn't for you, I said, my dad was on Okinawa. They were getting ready to invade mainland Japan. Truman said there'd been 1 million casualties. I mean, the kids were sharpening sticks. It was going to be brutal. That island fighting, and you'd have backed them up into their own homeland. They had the suicide subs and the kamikazes, and they were loaded up. My point was, he said, you know, I worked on the bomb when I was there. He said, I worked on a fuse. And he said, you know, oddly enough, my wife, she worked down the hall, and she worked on a fuse mechanism. And he said, and we never knew what each of us did. Maybe less than a handful knew that it was for the atomic bomb. That's what compartmentalization is all about. Nowadays, everybody's got a dadgum cell phone. Everybody's going to do a book deal or something. It's not quite like that. So you have to... my theory on and premise on this is the people that knew, like 47, Roswell, the people that knew, they compartmentalized it. It's a different America then. Well, a lot of those people are dead. So there's a complete disconnect after it's been handed off to this department or this department, and now in some corporate vault somewhere that has a quasi-governmental relationship. And I know that's a long way to explain it. That's how they keep this stuff secret. It's either one of two things. Either they're breaking the technology out, and that's why we're seeing some advances now, or they've got it and they realize that the power brokers in this world will no longer be in the oil business. They will no longer be in the they'll have to get out and get an honest job like the rest of us. Well, no, Congress isn't necessarily an honest job, but you get my point. I think it's kind of multifaceted. It can go a lot of different directions. But two, I ride motorcycles, as I told you, and I got an old Harley Sportster. It was my dad's. It's 84. But if I took that Harley and took it to the people on the Mayflower, gassed it up, loaded it up, got it all ready, took it back in time. That's basically what would happen with a UFO. They would see this bright, shiny object. They might be able to roll it. One day they might get it started, but they're not going to know how to change the plugs. They're not going to be able to adjust the carburetors. They won't have the technology to make gasoline to run it. They won't know how to put air in the tires. And that's sort of like what we're at, I think, with this stuff.
0 point energy. I love talking about this subject. What's your opinion on it?
I think it's reality. I just don't think we've got it. We got that genie in the bottle just yet, or if we do, they're not putting it out because it would put them all out of business. And we wouldn't have these wars. Imagine all that energy we spend on energy. I mean, not like energy is in nuclear or anything like that. All that energy, brain width, we spend on all this stuff and all these wars and all these people that die. Imagine if this world just united behind something. I don't think they ever will.
0 point energy is basically technology that enables energy to be free. That means no more utilities, no more fossil fuels, no more any of that stuff. And supposedly Nikola Tesla figured this out a long time ago.